Small little witches, and vampires too big for their britches. This is your look at the Diamond Select, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Short Vampire, and Zeldaborn Collector's Action Figures. The residents of Halloween Town are monsters and creatures who make Halloween possible, and they love nothing more than to frighten people year after year. But when Jack Skellington has an idea to take over Christmas, the 4 vampire brothers and the 2 witch sisters go along with his plan and do their best to recreate the holiday. This deluxe action figure of Short Vampire and Zelda Born from the Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas come with an umbrella, a broom, and a piece of Halloween Town's guillotine. Collect all 6 parts in Series 7 and Series 8. Before we get a closer look at the Short Vampire and Zeldaborn, the first thing we're going to do is just to calculate, of course, how tall these figures actually stand. A big thank you to the folks once again at Diamond Select who provided the sample that we're having a look at in this review. Stopping the tape measure at the very top of the short vampire, it doesn't like to be called small. Stopping the tape measure right there, you're looking at the vampire standing 4 inches exactly. And switching that to centimeters, then you're looking at the figure standing 10.3 centimeters tall. Switching that now back to inches, it seems like an easy feat, but sometimes very difficult to pull off. And we're going to take the tape measure again, and we're going to take it to the very top of Zeldaborn's hats. Zeldaborn, like Helgemine, doesn't have removable hats, so that is, of course, the highest point on the figure. And stopping it right there, she is going to be a lot smaller than the Short Vampire. He's not so short when he's compared to his smaller friends. She stands at 4.1 inches in height, so she's quite tiny. And switch that to centimeters, then you're looking at the figure standing 10.4 centimeters tall. Well, we already know Burnt Santa Jack is going to be a lot taller than these figures, so let's put scales to something a little bit smaller and easy to manage. Bringing in the other vampire that we already had a look at. This was the Short Vampire. Small vampire, doesn't like to be called short or mini. I have to kind of remember how each one prefers to be referred to as. And then, of course, let's bring in the other witch, quite considerably taller. This is Helgemine. So you can really see how they differ in size. I guess you could have, in a way, swapped this vampire to the one behind it. And if they had packaged that, perhaps, with Zeldaborn, just because Zeldaborn is so small. But I guess you could say there's just as much plastic being used for the Short Vampire as there was also for the Small Vampire, who's not as small when you compare the two. Some positive news to report is that this set, containing the Vampire and Witch, does include the much-needed accessory to the diorama piece that we've been waiting for. This is the bottom flooring. And if it doesn't quite make some sense right now, one good thing is that they do include with it is an instruction guide, which we've already had a look at. We already have this piece. This was included with Burnt Santa Jack. We also have then this piece, and we also have this piece right here. So I feel, ladies and gentlemen, we can make some final progress when it comes to putting the pieces together. I suppose before that, let's have a look at the actual flooring. I know not too much to report. I mean, anybody would be more excited, I'm sure, to see it be all put together. But just to show you the detailing that they've done to the flooring, some nice little cracks there, and just sort of indentations that they had to kind of make it look like it's sort of a faux stone. There's a lot of little openings. Of course, all of these will make more sense as we put the piece with the other pieces together. This is a smooth section that, of course, has a few tabs. This will be the piece that connects to one of the walls. But without further ado, I know I don't want to keep talking about things like this. You guys want to see some progress being had. So let's start putting some of the pieces together and see how far along we are on the guillotine for Halloween Town. Just for that, I've actually moved the camera back just a little bit so we can see kind of a good idea of how everything comes together. We'll start first with the flooring. I know it's the part that we already just finished having a look at. You'll have this section right here, and then you have this area right here. This is going to be the section that's going to connect to the steps, the little stairwell. But I think before we do that, before we kind of get to going with those, I want to attach the brick piece. Now, there are two sections of the wall. There's one that goes here, and then there's one that goes here. You'll know which one it is because the one on the back is completely flat, whereas the one that came included with Jack is curved, as you can hopefully see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach, I'm going to take these posts, 1 and 2, and I'm just going to feed them into those open slots. And hopefully, if everything goes well, we're probably going to hear a bit of a snap or a creak or a squeak. Anyways, and then we have basically this. Now, the back wall will connect right here, right? Makes some sense. And then now we can go ahead and add the stairwell. So the stairs are going to fit into this little open groove right here, and then this big open area. This is going to just fit underneath. And underneath there, and then just pop this up. It might help also, too, if you just do it from the bottom here. Push everything in. Make sure everything's good and tight. And we are making, ladies and gentlemen, some considerable progress. Now we can go ahead and then take this piece. Now this is going to fit along to the back. There is a little like post right here. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, it's right there. And then that's going to fit right into that open groove. So again, you're just going to take that. These will also fit into the little slots on this side and this side here. And again, you're just going to fit everything in like that, and then pop the back in. And just with 3 figures down, we've already got a good working something to look at. It'll be even more something to look at when we finally get the back wall piece. And of course, the guillotine that's going to go right in the middle here. I guess that will be part of the included accessories, the part of the included diorama pieces that's going to come included with Series 8 of the Nightmare Before Christmas figures. Pretty happy, I must say, that we're moving a little closer to getting that guillotine finished. I think that's going to be quite the nice little setup when it's all said and done. Anyways, I feel like I'm stealing the thunder of these pretty cool looking figures. The smaller short vampire, and of course, Zelda Born. Looking at the accessories that come included with the figures, we'll first start with another parasol or umbrella, either or, depending on how you want to call it. Just in case you're curious as to what it looks like next to the one that came included with the smaller vampire. As you can see, the small vampire, though bigger when you compare it to the short vampire, did actually have a smaller umbrella. They're not much different in paint, more that dark kind of rusted chocolate brown underneath, and still has the points along the top, with also small hands. Speaking of small hands, not to draw your attention to the rather small little tiny hands, but they are different pegs. So in case you are curious as to whether you could use this umbrella for the short vampire, the answer is no. As you can see, one is a little bit longer than the other. One is shaped differently than the other, so you can't use the same umbrella. I guess you could force this one in. This one might probably be a more easier fit, but they're really intended, of course. The one that is supposed to come with the vampire is the one that you're supposed to be putting with that vampire. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. High-fiving hands are what you are treated to when you first look at the vampire, and that's the case on both sides, right there and right there. We're going to go ahead and pop this one off. Now, I do want to say, though, this particular peg was really quite tight when I first got this figure out of the packaging. So you want to be careful. I mean, still, tread lightly when it comes to removing these hands. If you feel like there's resistance when you're pulling the hands, sort of like what I'm getting right now, stop, kind of reassess the situation, because you don't want to cause stress marks and eventually twist that right off. And you joke, but I've actually had that happen myself. Twisted what I thought was a hand that was freeing itself, and ultimately I just twisted the peg right off, and I broke the hand. Then you just go ahead and navigate that hand back in with the umbrella. Call it umbrella for the time being. And that's what it looks like in the vampire's hand. It looks good. And I'm going to probably be displaying the vampires with umbrella, just because I think it looks a lot nicer. And you can still have the high five hands on the other side. Looking at the detail done here for the short vampire, the shorter variety, he is very domed shape. And as you can see on the underside as well, there's nothing happening. Just a big old chasm. Hello, hello. Timmy O'Toole would not find his way out a well that size. It's a Simpsons reference. As you can see, some nice detailing done to the actual, I don't know if you would call it, well, I guess you could call it the cloak. It sort of has like a cross-hatching, whoosh, whoosh, that's been done to the surface area there. It looks, I have to admit, quite nice. As well, there's some detailing also done to the cape wings, if you want to consider them wings. And that's the detail done to his face. Now, the faces are different, considerably different between this one and the vampire that we had gotten before. Much more pudgier face. He bears some resemblance to a guy I went to school with who may or may not have been a vampire. He never really wore black, but he wore a lot of tracksuits. Unless there was an irony to it, the fact that he wore tracksuits and he was basically this size. But I don't think he was a vampire. At least not that I'm aware of, at least. The face sculpt is actually really quite good on this one, still sharing a lot of the same elements that the other vampire possessed, like, for example, the very pale blue there on its face, the outer area of its eyes done in that same blue color, but it's more like a more darker, almost ocean blue, and these silver eyes as well. They're not quite silver, but they definitely have a much more silver element to them than the coloring of the rest of his face. Little tiny teeth. I can count off 5 of them. He has 5, 2 big ones, and 3 little tiny ones on either side. Decent looking head sculpt, I have to admit. It's very accurate to the way it looks in the film. Sure, yeah, it's fine and good to talk the differences between the vampires, but unless you see them actually in hand, you really see how they do differ from one another. One is, like I said, a little bit more portlier than the other, and the face sculpts are definitely vastly different from one another. I kind of like this one still, admittingly, but there's a charm, I have to admit, for the smaller, more stouter-looking vampire here. As it goes for the rest of the paint done to his, well, I guess his otherwise black body. There is a little bit of breakup that occurs here with the blood red that they use for the interior of his cape collar, or cloak collar. Unfortunately, I've got a little bit of blood that's followed its way down into the front of the collar. It's paint, I hope, at least. There's a little bit there. That's unfortunate. But like the rest of it is generally quite clean. Sort of has a caked on look. Has a slight sheen to it as well, where the rest of his body is more matte. Flip the figure around, spin the figure around, and there's some little wrinkles that they've put along the top seam areas. If this is the gauge as to how big his arms are, I mean, if this is just draping and his arms are only here, he's skinny, certainly at least in the arms. It's not so much skinny here. But again, really nice work that they've put to texturing that cape on both sides, this side and, of course, this side right here. Articulation on the stouter vampire, short vampire. His head rotates back and forth. I mean, despite the fact that his head is sort of rooted inside the collar here, still very easy to get your hand in there. You move it back and forth like that. The arms, again, are sort of on pegs. They're ball joints, but they don't always move like a ball joint. Like, there's a little bit more freedom on this one than there was on the other one that we looked at. They allow the arms to hinge out slightly, but more the articulation actually just works from moving the arms back and forth. That's where they're really working their best. The hands rotate also back and forth, and as we've already mentioned, there's not a whole lot happening on the underside. Normally, I would be going in there and moving around, and playing around with the legs, the ankles, and all that fun stuff, but like I said, there's not a whole lot happening under there. Instead, we're sending our love down the well. This is, again, a Simpsons reference. Comparing the coven of witches here. Would you still count a coven if there's only 2 witches? I'm going to have to ask some of my witch friends. I've already said too much. But as you can see, there's quite a considerable difference between Zelda Born and Helgemine. If you look at it, Zeldaborn actually only goes up to really about the chest area here of Helgemine. The faces are, of course, quite drastically different, where the vampires share, if you could say, some similar features. The witches are actually quite considerably different. And I guess witches do change. Not all the witches have here. Don't stereotype a witch by considering that they're just all green-skinned witches with warts on their nose. No, witches have feelings, and of course they change. They look different, like really ugly snowflakes. Anyways, we'll just move this one out of the way and have a closer look here at Zeldaborn. Like with the Helgemine, her hat doesn't remove. You can also see her eyes, almost hidden by the fact that she's got the rim of her hat actually hanging over it. But luckily they did paint the eyes well enough with white, so they do stand out, as well as these quite gross, gruesome looking warts that she's got all over her nose. Ooh, that's disgusting. She does have some visible witch teeth, I don't know what care she's actually putting into keeping those polished, but they seem at least white. So she's doing something right. She doesn't have any mouth articulation, even though that's something we'll talk about in a second. Overall, it's a decent looking figure when it's, like I said, it's all said and done. She has longer hair. Hers is a little bit more black. I don't know if she's dyeing her hair, unlike when we looked at Helgamine, of course. And it does have a little bit more of a flow to it, sort of a wave happening to it. She's got some stripes on her sleeves. Equally so, she's got some stripes also on her legs. And there's that peg point on the underside there. Like I said, she's a fun little figure, even though, unfortunately, you're really going to use a display stand when it comes to displaying her. Let me just move the vampire out of the way there, not taking the focus away from little tiny Zeldaborn. Like I said, she's a very small figure, but I guess she has the details where it counts. And definitely make sure, though, don't lose this, whatever you do. Don't lose this, because she would be having some mighty difficulty when it comes to actually being able to stand properly. Having a look at the figure's articulation, her head rotates back and forth. There's no obstruction either by the way that they've sculpted the hair. It stays far enough away from the rest of her dress that you quite easily can move her head back and forth. It does also move up and down. It seems like there's a ball joint working behind the scenes, tirelessly and effortlessly, allowing the head to move up and down and back and forth. The arms rotate all the way around. From what I can gather, it doesn't look like they're ball joints. Rather, instead, they're just pegged in place. But it's just enough that you can move the little tiny witch's arms back and forth. And she does also have leg articulation. Why she has leg articulation, I really don't know, because, like I said, without the use of a display stand, poor little tiny Zeldaborn is going to be fallen and won't be able to get up. So we're going to go ahead and just put the post back inconveniently, non-discreetly, actually on the front of the figure. And overall, again, like decent looking figures. We'll just bring back in the more portlier looking vampire, and we'll bring in the other vampire as well that we've already had a look at. And there she is right there. Let's bring also in Helgamine. Now, of course, left from this equation, left out of this mix right now, is Burnt Santa Jack, but it's not about Jack all the time. Sometimes we have to focus on the citizens of Halloween Town, and over the course of these reviews, we've had a look at some vampires, and we've also had a look at some witches of various sizes and shapes. Another great Diamond Select Nightmare Before Christmas release here with a short vampire and Zeldaborn the Witch. Truthfully, it's not going to be catering every single Nightmare Before Christmas fan out there. There are the casual collectors that maybe, if anything, are going to be wanting to get a Sally, want to be getting a Jack Skellington, and maybe the Mayor or Oogie Boogie. But this line, the one that Diamond is producing, like they've done with previous lines in the past, want to produce every character and every citizen you can think of from Halloween Town. So this is geared towards those die-hard collectors that, like I said, want to fill out. One great thing that if you have been collecting the Nightmare Before Christmas figures, or based on what you see in these reviews, the neat thing about what Diamond's producing as well is not only are you going to be getting the figures, but you're also getting the bonus, that draw that pulls you in by collecting pieces of Halloween Town. Through the various waves that they've released in the past, we've been building various pieces of Halloween Town, and now our efforts are focused here with Series 6 and Series 7, Series 8, where we can build ourselves the guillotine. I must pat myself on the back, though I've done nothing really. I'm happy that we at least made some progress putting together the guillotine. I would feel so robbed, so robbed, if we had gotten more pieces of things that you can't even put together until we had to wait for Series 8. Thank goodness, at least Diamond Select, when it came time to pieces being put with these figures, they at least put for Series 7, pieces that you could actually put together. The hard part when you do get sometimes these diorama pieces, if you do have to wait for later figures down the road in the wave, there's always a possibility that you could lose those extra pieces. What did this belong to? What part was this supposed to go to? Is probably things that you're going to be saying. At least here in Series 7, we've made progress, and we put together at least half, maybe 3/4 even, of the guillotine. Looking forward to putting together, of course, the rest when we have a look at the eventual release of Series 8. What do you guys think down below? Let me know what you guys think of the short vampire and Zeldaborn. I'm still convinced I went to school with this guy. I don't know, I'm going to have to maybe look him up and see if he's sucking blood and living in castles. I know he was living in an apartment at one point. A vampire apartment? I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. Either way, if you guys are new to the channel and liking the content you're seeing, consider the idea of hitting the subscribe button down below. Consider the idea, if you be so kind, to turn the bell notification on. And stay tuned to this channel Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's when new videos are coming your way. There's going to be a lot of Diamond Select stuff heading your way as well. So if you like Diamond Select releases, statues, figures, and other things, stay tuned. Keep your peepers peeled to this channel because, like I said, there's going to be a lot coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.